Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, the video series where we're digging into the subject of media in the 21st century and all of the ways that we interact with it and the ways that it is used to manipulate our thoughts and behaviors, and also ways that we can guard our minds against these manipulations and attacks. For the last, number of videos, we've been dealing with some conceptual material as far as psychology and history and even some logical fallacies and material of that nature. I said in the last video that we're going to start digging into another news article so that we can start to apply a lot of what we've been talking about and learning so far, particularly when we're engaging with a news article. So this next run of videos that I'm going to do, we are going to dive into another online news article. And yeah, like I said, see if we can apply some of the concepts, the history, and understanding that we've been discussing over the past number of weeks. As we read, we want to be careful to think clearly and consider all that we can with respect to context at both the micro, sort of the immediate level that we're engaging with, and also the macro levels where, we can zoom out and sort of think about things at a global or even, just the mass societal level. We want to pay attention to the framing of arguments. We definitely want to pay attention to the way that language is used, particularly with respect to specificity or even vagueness. We also want to look for any signs of manipulative or emotionally priming language. We want to be on the lookout for any glaring logical fallacies. We haven't really gone too deep into much with respect to the kinds of fallacies to watch out for, so I won't go too hard on many of those just yet. If I see some, I will point them out. If there are ones that we have talked about, I'll explain a little bit more in detail. I do want to mention, if anyone has been watching and has visited the Frontisterium Substack, that I have linked to various past videos, you would have been exposed to many of the logical fallacies there in that writing. I'll not their use, but definitely their explanation of what they are and how they're used. I'll link that site again on this video, particularly to the various logical fallacies and their explanations on that resource. Okay, so with that intro out of the way, let's get started. This article was pulled from Yahoo News. I like to use that resource because it's a pretty general smattering of various news articles. We get a lot of pop culture and a lot of just really, sort of the, what I would call like news for the masses. There are things that cater towards certain political ideologies, but they're not so overt as many of the major, more, outspoken partisan sources that are available to us. The headline reads, "Will insects' lab-grown meat replace traditional farmed meat?" This was written in September of 2021, which is interesting to note and should be remembered for the future. Right away, I want to point out something that has been what I see to be a hallmark of the 24-hour news cycle environment that has become the norm in today's world. That headline is designed in a very peculiar way, and I see that it primes us and plays on the short attention spans that have been programmed into so many of us today. First, notice that it's not even a fully formed, grammatically coherent sentence. Do you notice that a conjunction is missing between the words insects and lab grown? Why is this the case? I have my suspicions. It could be that the author simply wanted to save time, that, they were in a hurry, they were in a rush, and maybe they were on a word count, like a word quota. But then that begs the question, to what end? It's not as if this is being presented in a forum where all news stories have an allotted time segment where the author must spit out the gist of their story before the next talking head gets trotted out to repeat the circus act over and over and over again. This isn't like some kind of cable news segment. It's a written article that we're reading online. So why shorten anything about it? One thing that I think is important to make note of is that conjunctions, the words that are used for conjunctions, do a very important thing in our minds when we're engaging with the written word. They are connecting words. They're used in the English language to string thoughts and concepts together in such a way as to allow our minds to both easily and accurately track context. When they're present, they spur on cognition in the reader, which allows us to engage the critical thinking skill sets which are needed to parse meaning and truth that is present in any bit of writing. Conversely, when they're absent or missing, we're left to sort of bring them up and include them, input them on our own based on any arbitrary experience or really a guess that we might have, and that could very well lead to some serious problems when it comes to accurately rendering and comprehending the ideas that are present in any bit of writing. Let's go ahead and take this headline as an example, and we'll use the most basic conjunctions of and, or, and but, and see what we find when we put these in. For this situation, we could use 2 of the 3 conjunctions and have the headline still make sense, grammatically speaking. We could plug in either and or. Notice that there is a shift in the tone when one is used over the other. If we use the word and, we get the sense that there is a growing movement to do away with traditional meat altogether, and that we'll be left with one of 2 options. This is sort of a predictive or almost a speculative writing. Likewise, if we plug in the word or, it leads us to think that this replacement process has already begun, and now we're waiting to see which option of insects or lab-grown meat comes out on top, and that's what we'll be dealing with for the rest of the future of our meat consumption. Now, you may say that there really is a distinction without a difference here, as the net result of both is that our current paradigm of traditional meat, eating beef and chicken and things like that, natural beef and chicken, is ultimately replaced by something new and strange to us, regardless of which context, the and or the or context that we choose here. And I'll grant that fact, but my point here is that the distinction leads to different thought patterns which have their own trajectory and outcropping series of nested thoughts. It's important that we know which is meant to be present in this headline, because it will set the contextual frame for the rest of the ensuing article. One of the ways in which our minds have been slowly programmed at a broad scale over time is through the alteration and destruction of the language that we speak, particularly in its written form. It's difficult to know just when this degradation started. We could look for infiltrations in the education system, but it certainly took off like a rocket with the advent of the text message. Even that thing itself is an example of what I mean. When you just examine the word text message, you don't see the word text. It's an abbreviation, TXT, which elicits in our mind an understanding of a conceptual idea or a thing that we all understand now, but it's a shortening of the language. It's an alteration of the language. In his book 1984, George Orwell referred to this sort of thing as newspeak, and it's easy to see that when we alter our language to such a degree that we cannot articulate thoughts in such a way as to accurately convey meaning and truth. This points directly to the pervasive postmodernism that has become a sort of default operational state for much of what we engage with in media and technology. Now, I realize that this may seem like a rather small or even trivial issue regarding this headline. I mean, come on, it's just a word. We can get the idea of what's being said just by reading the headline, and if we press deeper into the article, it's probably going to be clear what is meant by this headline. However, it is my view that when we're engaged with media in the 21st century, especially when it's presented on the mainstream platforms like Yahoo and others, we're going to be exposed to all manner of psychological programming and manipulations. And I do see that this issue of sort of monkeying with the written language does damage to our ability to understand what is actually being said, because it ultimately obfuscates what would otherwise be a very clear and objective presentation of information. You know, I could camp on this one topic for a whole series of videos in and of itself. And I view it as a very serious issue, and one that has had major implications to the way that our culture moves at the mass and societal level, and that I do see the damage that's been done to our collective ability to think and reason is quite concerning. You know, I've had many conversations with people where at certain points throughout any kind of conversation, it seems as though people become rather illiterate, or that they don't really know how to deal with their own language in a way that allows them to articulate their thoughts. It's pretty wild, and I definitely see it as a major problem. There's more to look at within this headline, but for now, I will sign off underscoring the importance of maintaining the integrity of our written language. We must protect it and fight for keeping the details intact. You know, the devil works within the holes that are left when we degrade our language, and it's in those holes where we are then left vulnerable to various attacks and manipulations. So that's just the start of this next dissection of a news article. We're going to keep going. It's going to go a little slower than the last one. We're going to hopefully go a bit deeper because we have a lot more information to draw on that we've been able to learn from the series up to this point. I hope you're going to enjoy this. I know it's going to be fun. We're going to learn a lot, and we're going to see a lot of tactics that are present that will hopefully springboard us into the next series of conceptual material. But not to get too far ahead, we'll stick to this article for the next series of videos. Until next time, I hope you all stay safe, I hope you all look after each other, and I hope that you all stay diligent and vigilant, keeping your minds on guard.